Finally, when all supplies were aboard, everyone packed his gear and leaves for all hands were ended. The Franklin was on her way again to rejoin Task Force 58, with escort vessels alongside and her own planes overhead to spot any trouble or interference. She was steaming to Ulithi. Ulithi. Not too long ago, these protected waters were filled with the Imperial Japanese Navy. Now it was America's secret weapon of the Pacific War, an anchorage large enough to hold the most powerful armada of warships in history. The fleet that had come to stay. The spearhead of our Pacific strategy was implemented with these fleet units. Formed into task groups, they had prepared for and covered all our island landings, and now are ready to sortie to the very door of the Japanese home islands. We were to be part of the with us in a raid on shore installations on the Japanese island of Honshu. The main Japanese islands were 4 days' journey from Ulithi. We were on our way. At 3 minutes before 7 on March 19th, less than 100 miles from Honshu, the Franklin's planes took off into a heavily overcast sky. We were making 24 knots. A sixth of the crew was at breakfast when we got a message from the Hancock that they saw a twin-engine Jap medium bomber. Our planes started looking for him, but he slipped down out of a cloud and laid 2 500-pound bombs on our flight deck. 45 of our planes were aloft, but there were 31 on the flight deck and 22 on the hangar deck, fully gassed and armed. The first heavy vapor explosion enveloped the stern in flames. We turned into the wind to keep the fire and smoke astern. The Jap bomber had pulled up from his bomb run and was streaking for home when the leader of Air Group 5 got him and shot him down. The plight of the Franklin was probably best described by one of our returning flyers.
I was with the first squadron. Just before we got over the target, my oil line let go, so I had to nurse a crippled plane back home. I tried to stay in the clouds because I couldn't outfly a seagull. When I broke through the overcast, I saw flames shoot hundreds of feet above the Franklin and a 2,000-foot column of smoke. It looked awful bad, but she still had some headway. I got permission for an emergency landing on the Hancock.
The fire raged as bombs, rockets, and small caliber ammunition continued to explode with increasing violence. The conflagration station was wrecked by the first blast and its personnel knocked out, so the firefighting had to be taken up by emergency parties. Water pressure was good for a while, but fires on the hangar deck soon severed the lines, were responsible for a great many casualties. Hospital corpsmen and first aid crews were as busy as those fighting the fire. With both elevators knocked out, first aid stations had to be set up on the forward area of the flight deck. In this scene of chaos, when the instinct for self-preservation should have been uppermost, dozens of selfless heroes were born. The Franklin's crew was writing a magnificent page in the history book of naval disaster. The first explosions blasted members of the flight deck crew overboard. One crewman tells this story.
I had just finished breakfast and came up on deck. That's all I remember till I found myself in the water swimming. And I didn't have any uniform on. Couldn't see my ship for smoke. She seemed to be blowing herself to pieces.
The amount of water poured on the fire caused a decided list to starboard. We knew that news of our trouble would soon reach the enemy, so gun crews were at stations for all available weapons. We didn't have long to wait. Even though we were flanked by our own ships, the Franklin was a sitting duck. And here's what happened to one attacker. Santa Fe came alongside, pouring all the water she could pump. We managed to get some of our wounded transferred. The Franklin was now dead in the water because engine spaces had to be evacuated on account of smoke, and the only power we had was from one forward emergency diesel generator unit. The destroyer Hughes stood by the stern and took stretcher cases off the fantail. These men had been marooned below the burning flight deck for about 4 hours. Several decks below the waterline is an emergency steering station. Report of what happened there.
I was the quartermaster on watch. We realized from the time of the first explosion that our ship was hurt, maybe finished. Soon we were trapped by water pouring down. We had one phone line to the bridge. That's how we steered the ship. They told us to hang on. They would get us out somehow. They did, 18 hours later.
With compartments flooded to even her keel, a tow line was passed to the Pittsburgh. 12 hours after the tow began, the Franklin started under her own power. She had been hurt by the enemy and buffeted by fate. She had drifted a hulking wreck incapable of movement to within a few miles of the Japanese coast. But now she was steaming under her own power, manned by her own crew. As soon as decks could be cleaned, the survivors met in prayer for those less fortunate.